Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to another Office Hours. Hey, Dima, how you doing?
Hello, good. Long time. Been a while.
It's been a while. It's been a while. It's been a while, and two releases also passed. So we have
yeah,
something to talk about.
that's true. And I think one thing I do regret about is that I didn't have my coffee yet, which we talked about before. So we'll see if there was like some magic and I could do like
Yeah,
like we should.
so drop us hello in the comments. We see already Ronnie and we see David in the chat. So just drop hello, tell us where you're joining us from, and what's the time for you. For us, it's 3 p.m. Israeli Standard Time. Yeah, so we have George as well. I hope that all of you, at least at some degree, are refreshed or conscious. If not, you can go grab your cup of coffee. All right, so uh, we have Pawan, we have George. Hey, 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 hello, everyone. Um, just to make sure that we all on the same page. If you have any questions whatsoever, something that you would like us to address, please please drop a comment in the chat, and we'll make sure to address it. Yeah. So late lunchtime in Sweden. We have Eric. Hey, Eric. Welcome to the stream. Ronnie, of course, from Finland. Nice, nice, nice.
We
Uh,
can just move to the Discord. I see a lot of familiar faces from Discord here, so we can just continue the party there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, if you all would like to go to the after party to Discord, you can do it, certainly. It's just we still prefer the YouTube environment because it's much more accessible for everyone, for non-Discord users, perhaps. But again, we are those who are giving you a break from Discord to just hop on another platform.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so Dima, what news do we have? What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, so I think we can talk about a few things. So we recently have the latest release was 0.18, which was kind of not a huge release, but we've done some underground work to kind of touch a couple of areas, and we can discuss it a bit in a moment. Um, we have the 0.19 release, which is right about the corner. We already finalized it. It's just kind of some final version release flows we need to finish. So I hope we'll be able to do it either today or tomorrow. And then we can put it out into the world. We can discuss a bit, kind of what to expect there and etc. Uh, and there is another cool project that we've been working on, I think, in the DevX team is around the new documentation, which we can maybe kind of speak about a
We
bit,
can, yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely can. I think that we could even start from this, and then kind of gradually move towards the other thing, and maybe hands-on explanations or things like that. Of course, every question, every comment, feedback, just drop it in the comments. We will address everything eventually. So let's start by sharing this cute screen. So as you see, it looks different than the dogs that you may been introduced before, because it is different. It got a lot of some similar and a lot of the same content for like from what was before the old docs. Of course, the old docs is still available, and nothing really kind of drastically changed. But we have come to realize that, okay, this is time for us to make some changes, to do a refreshment, to make sure that everything is structured a bit more nicely, that everything is much more accessible in ways, and categorized in other ways that we think that could be more helpful. Of course, it's still in making. It's still a work in progress. Um, but nevertheless, it's something that we are really proud of, and we hope that it could help you, our community, and to our new users and people who are just discovering Novo, to just be more successful, to get things right away, and to understand how things are working. So the all main things, of course, the API reference is still here, along with SDKs, with demos, with community and support sections. We broke it into sections of course, the introduction, kind of explaining how Novo works, what is Novo, and for those who just don't like really to read a lot and just want to move straight towards doing things hands-on, we have the quick starts here and the SDKs, so you could just dive right ahead. Um, yeah, so a lot of things that we've been working on. We added the concepts page. Uh, we categorize subscribers and workflows separately to just introduce gradually towards what it actually is. And again, this is a lot of new things. And we really hope that you will read this to ask why the purple and not brand red pig. Okay. um, this is actually a good question. I'm not sure if it's going to stay red pink, but we'll see. We'll see. It's still work in progress. Anyways, um, by the end of this week, we will introduce it publicly and make sure that you are all having an access to it, and help us to iterate a bit and provide us feedback, what we should add, what should maybe change a bit, maybe change the wordings, maybe even change the structure. But again, main idea is just to improve the experience. So another thing that we've been discussing internally, and something that we're probably going to do, is that for those who prefer not to adapt right away towards the new docs, the old docs will still be accessible and still be in reach. So you could just hop in between and kind of go to the old docs, or if you would like to see how it looks in the new docs, you could just, like, both repos, both documentations will be available. So you could gradually move towards the new one. Yeah, so do if anyone has questions or something regarding the docs, please drop them below. And if not, then let's move toward the actual releases and the news that we have.
We have Ronnie asking, why isn't the JSON indented? I was like, yeah, I was looking at this. I was like, yeah, we need to fix that.
Yeah, we need to. Okay, yeah. So of course, a lot of things to still fix, to work on, but yeah, it's what David says. It's work in progress. But that's exactly what we need, especially for first-time users and early adapters, to just help us find those things, those tweaks, things that we maybe missed or did not pay enough attention. So yeah. Is the new docs open to contributing? Of course it is. And something that is going, like something that we're introducing as well with this documentation, is that the docs is going to be in a separate repo, in a separate repository from the main project. So like, if you would like to submit any changes or even open issues, it's going to be in a separate repository where everything will be related to the documentation. And of course, Vanessa, it's totally be available, and it's an option, and even we endorse that.
So it's, Emil, I think it's still MD like content, right? So you can have like
Yes,
files and
yes, it's
just
still
update them.
content. The engine behind it, we worked with, we built it upon Mintlify. Very cute, looks very sleek. Another thing that we're going to introduce as well is how to say that, that the docs which will be iterated by the versions, I think. Like, for example, we have the 0.18 and 0.19 release. So every documentation, like every time that we will add new content for new features to the docs, you will have a drop menu which will indicate like what is the version of the documentation. So you will have the latest, and you will also will could access to older versions for documentation like 0.18 or 0.16. Okay, not 16 probably anymore, but from this moment on, you will have the latest and versions back. So um, if you will need to make sure that something is not really changed from your current version, the version that you are running, you could just go and see the documentation that is the most relevant to the version that is on your machine or the version that you are running. Yeah, it looks fancy. Thank you. Yeah, it's really amazing. We're really proud of the work. All right. So, if of course, if anyone of you will have any further questions, feel free to drop comments or in the chat here, or even in the Discord server. We're more than happy to get your feedback, thoughts, or just endorsements. Yeah, Dima. So let's go back to the versions and releases.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. So, as we've mentioned previously, the latest release was 0.18, which is not a huge release. I mean, it got quite I don't remember how much like actual code has changed, but it was a lot of small things that we kind of wanted to improve, a lot of bugs, a lot of small improvements to the API. And we also had 3 new contributors to this version, which is really cool, and I really
Nice.
like it. I will touch maybe some of the general updates we've done here. So one is a bit work on the
Do
actual
you want
layout.
me to share your screen?
You can put my screen so we
Okay.
can take a look at it. So basically, we've done some not huge changes, but some minor changes on the actual layout and how we work in terms of the real estate here. So basically, we got rid of the top navigation bar and removed some of the paddings and margins on all of the pages, basically. So there is like one fluent page across the board versus like the old version. I think I have it somewhere here, which was kind of the nav bar and then
Mm-hmm.
display and that place. Um, so basically, what we try to do is to gain a bit more real estate back, because we've been limited working in those kind of containers, and we lost a lot of space basically for valuable real estate to things that like didn't really occupy a lot of place. So we've done this change mostly to specifically for the future to kind of provide us the ability to expand the navigation stack for things like breadcrumbs and kind of building it along the way. So it was the first step to kind of help us. The next piece of work will be around the left navigation menu to make it a bit more compact, maybe to restructure a bit the environment. So we're doing incremental changes. We still don't want to stop all the other things we're doing. So we kind of taking it step by step and introducing it increment by increment. So this was making really this whole navigation bar a bit more compact and giving us this blank space of actually this workable area basically so we can build on top of that in the future. So a few kind of tweaks in the layout design and the general
Mm-hmm.
layout application that will be expanding in the future with some extra functionalities like breadcrumbs and a lot of those things we kind of preparing the designs for them now so we can also release it for some folks who want to help with the front end stuff or want to get some experience with working with front end areas. So we will be releasing those tickets also during Oktoberfest and going forward. And Ronnie mentioned what new contributors outside of Oktoberfest. Yes, it is happening, and we actually been really. I'm really surprised. Like almost in every release, between 3 to 10 new contributors joining in and kind of participating in our work, which is for me is really incredible to
Yeah.
see.
Uh,
This,
yeah. My
yeah,
my question that I don't know if anyone has this question or something that kind of runs into their minds, but can you share why you have decided to make this small release and kind of put it or make those releases really next to one another?
Yeah, so it's really like we try to kind of we recently moved to a more of a feature flagging mechanism, which basically means we can release more frequently and then not affect, the kind of big releases are always challenging because there are so many moving things happening, and it's not
Hmm.
always easy to kind of have a lot of moving areas, and you need to kind of take care of them. Smaller releases, meaning impact surface much smaller, and it's much easier to you to work on our cloud service. We release frequently, so even before we actually make the official releases, we can release multiple times to the cloud prior to
Hmm.
that. But also kind of wrapping the hand around smaller releases is just easier to comprehend. And with this specific release, like we thought that we had some migrations that needed to be run specifically around the provider configuration, so we kind of tried not to make it even bigger, so we cut it in there. But yeah, usually like smaller releases are just simpler to wrap your hand around,
Okay, okay, makes
usually.
so basically what we might expect in the future is to see more of those small releases and more frequent ones.
Yeah, I think so. We might get to that. We will see kind of as we progress, what works best. We're trying to automate a lot of those things. So maybe incorporating like nightly builds or something like this in the future. But yeah, we'll see. It's kind of case by case scenario depending on the big item we're working on. And some things are like specifically with patch releases, you don't want to make people wait for some bug fixes for a long time. So we kind of
Yeah, yeah.
can release it a bit more early on. We've discussed it in the previous area where we kind of set up basically the different UI for the provider configuration management and kind of a different way to actually, create providers, which we provided here in the ability to actually create multiple providers of the single channel. And one of the things that's introduced recently is if I look at the release docs, so you can actually now specify a specific identifier of a multi-provider configuration during the trigger. So let's say you have two SendGrid instances, two Twilio instances, and then you can create both of them. You can specify the default one as, let's say, SendGrid number one that will be picked up for everything. But let's say for specific workflows, you want to override this during your trigger execution and actually provide the integration identifier. And then now we will actually fetch this provider based on this identifier, and then it will use it the configurations over this provider when sending the email or SMS. What we kind of currently working on right now is in these weeks is to also allow a bit more smart condition selection. So basically, you can specify in the integration itself a set of conditions of where it will be used. For example, when a specific tenant is specified, or some other things along those lines. So you can actually create a rule set around when to use individual provider. In 0.18, you can actually override it using the API, and then you can access it when triggering the actual
Hmm.
notification. Um, so this is the one. We have also introduced the primary providers concept, as I mentioned previously. So when you would create, let's say, a new instance, you can see this small icon which mentioning that this is the default provider for a specific environment. So in this case, we have development and production for email. So you have one default provider per environment. If you would create more providers, you would be asked which of those will be the actual primary provider for this environment. So now we will always know when to go fall back for something. And in case you still want to use the other integration, you can still use it and override it as part of the trigger or the conditions that I mentioned previously. But the default provider will be picked up always unless some higher specificity provider was added. So the primary provider is a new functionality that was added, and it also requires, if you're self-hosting, it requires you to run the migration script. So the migration script instructions are available here, and basically
Hmm.
just make sure that you have the primary selected for your old integrations before running Novo. We have also introduced Planck email provider, which is a new provider in the Novo system. So you can take a look at it. It's just another really cool provider. We have a few other interesting kind of things added here. So we have some new handlebars helpers, such as sort. Um, let's see what else interesting stuff we have here. Yes. Another interesting thing to kind of pay attention to is the tenants functionality, which was going to be published on 0.19, which is going to be in tomorrow or by the end of this week, basically. Is the ability to create and manage tenants in the system, which we already discussed, but also with this release is actually being able to use the tenants inside your workflows. So after you will be creating, if you look again at this snippet. So we have two payload, and what you will be able to do is actually pass a tenant key as well. So say a tenant ID, let's say Nike, or specific tenant inside your system. It can be your object ID from your database, or just a human readable identifier for this particular tenant.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're actually creating the workflows, you can actually use those properties as part of your content. So you could say things like, I would say if I have a tenant. If I'm in a tenant environment, then I can do some stuff. And if the tenant is equal to a particular value, you can add a block of code, or you can use things like tenant dot data and dot logo to put the logo or some content specific to this tenant inside the actual templates. So the new tenant field will be added to the trigger, so you can actually
Mm-hmm.
basically use it as a context for your workflow execution items. And looking a bit into the future after that, you can specify variants based on those tenant specifications. For example, for one tenant you want to have one set of digest configuration, and for another tenant you might have a different set of digest configurations available to it. The same goes with other channels and content, and other things you can do with it.
Are there any features or capabilities that you are currently, or the team is very excited to work on and kind of the in priority now?
Yeah, so we are focusing right now on multiple areas. The first one is around translation management,
Mm-hmm.
and basically providing the ability to manage translations to notifications. And it's basically the ability to upload. And the approach we took there is kind of keeping the engineering first approach, is actually allowing to reuse a lot of the common practices around I18N translation. So basically the I18N JSON configuration files, which you can actually upload. A lot of companies work with Localize, or some other systems that help with localization, and then you export this localization JSON. And
Mm-hmm.
basically what you can do, you can push it using our own command line tool to Novo, and then use it as part of your template. So for example, instead of writing reply to comment, you can actually use the I18N variables, and actually say the path to this key, for example, would be reply, let's say comments dot reply to uh, button. And then basically what Novo will do is actually pick up the appropriate translation for
Mm-hmm.
this key, depending on the context of the subscriber. So if the subscriber speaks English, he will get the English version. If he will speak Spanish, he will get the Spanish version, and so on and so on. So it's very similar to what you would do with when you look performing localization to web apps
Mm-hmm.
and work with the localization JSONs. I can give you, because we are doing the office hours and it's things we haven't released yet. It's quite early stage. We are just kind of experimenting with a few ideas. If would love to get your feedback. Nikolai, as always, will probably kill me, but
The
we'll see
sneak
what
peeks, the
sneak.
forbidden sneak peeks.
Yeah, actually, Nikolai is working here, and let's make it attack. So like, hi, Nikolai. We are live streaming this to the world. Let's see.
It's like, I'm out of here.
um, okay, cool. So basically, what we are discussing currently is the ability. Nikolai is saying hi.
Nice. For those who don't know, Nikolai is our currently the product designer. He's doing an amazing work constantly. So yeah. I mean, we probably need some time to maybe even bring him on to office hours.
Yeah, we actually do, and he is already part of it here. Um, so basically, what we allow to do currently is the ability to upload the translations files, and the translation files usually are structured in a similar way you would structure the actual key value patterns with different localizations. You'd have a different JSON file for each translation, basically. And you can specify something we call identifiers in case you want to break down your translations into multiple files, and then you can
Mhm.
reference those files inside the templates depending on, so you don't have like one big huge JSON file, for example. And then obviously the actual language of the translation and localization file. um,
So wait,
Basically,
the idea is to upload a JSON file for every language, or could it be like a big JSON file with all the translations for the languages, and then it will be separated kind of by
yeah,
scope or
so
something?
usually how you would go with a different JSON file. Really, the reason is because you don't want to load unnecessarily languages for people who don't speak those languages. So you just
Mm.
end up in a very huge JSON file, which you don't need. Usually the common practice is actually kind of to,
To separate the languages.
yeah, to separate the files and kind of manage them. There is no technical limitation to that, but I think it just makes more sense.
It's more yeah, sure.
Yeah, to work like this. So obviously you can push it, upload it manually or push it from the command line or your CI basically system. And then on the actual usage, yeah, Rani, so it's a great question. So we discussed a few ways to actually sync them from GitHub. Currently, we decided to use the push and kind of connect with something like GitHub Actions, or kind of basically connect to the CI platform, because some of those things require some conflict resolution and etc. So you don't always necessarily want to do it manually, but we can create a very simple GitHub action to kind of connect to those areas and kind of do it automatically behind the scenes based on the structure. Um, just a second. All right. So basically, what we are trying to take a look right now is also how we can use, the actual keys when you create them. Um, Looking at the actual template, so what we're currently doing is we're trying to figure out, provide a bit more of the previews, for all the channels, because currently we only have previews for email in in-app, but for push and the other ones, we don't really have uh, those available. So basically what we are doing here is a bit restructuring the sidebar when you click on a node. So we provide a built-in preview, is a very simple one, available here. And then if you want to go kind of on the editing areas, it's actually click. You already see here some new stuff here. This is the variants, which is, we
Wow.
discussed it in the previous, just before that, with you can actually create multiple step variants. So you can have like the root variant, and then you can have modifications of that, and you can select them based on tenants, based on subscriber preferences, based on some other cool stuff.
Looks
So it's
good.
it's kind of connected in together. And then on the actual usage aspects of it, so we are exploring a few ideas. Again, bear in mind it's kind of really early explorations and it's not finalized yet, but basically we want to allow the ability to autocomplete all the available keys you have, so you don't have to remember it by hand, and obviously tell you, hey, if there is a key missing, you invented something, you would actually need to go and add it. um, and on the other hand, I think something also quite cool we're experimenting with right now. Um,
Before that, I mean, let's just
it's really
address the
cool.
questions.
So you are actually that's really cool. So you're actually using yeah, like a manual kind of. It's actually very impressive that you made it like this. I will share it with the team a bit later.
So
Uh,
yeah, so just a second. Let's first address what Mark asked. Like, are there any API changes coming up from the SDK maintainers perspective?
no, from the SDK perspective, we won't have any changes. All of the existing kind of locale functionality already exists on the subscriber, so it's only going to be kind of the workflow editor focus and the workflow engine, which is behind the scenes mostly, but maybe something else. So we'll see. We'll see what's going on.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's really impressive, Nature. I like the approach. We can provide it for people who need localization, and we haven't released it yet, so they can they can take a look at it.
yeah, that's really good.
Cool. So going back to the actual areas here. So one interesting thing we're trying to experiment with also right now is the ability to preview the content of a given key. It's my personal challenge with localization usually is when you try to kind of use a localized string, you need to go and check the content for it and go back and forth. Um, and I think it could be a really annoying thing. So what we're trying to figure out is create those, small preview tooltips if you hover or click over a localization key, so you can actually see the content in the given languages, including the variables or anything that is connected to that. Um, so I think this one is going to be quite a neat functionality. And then on the other hand, we're also experimenting with kind of showing you and previewing the actual keys available on the variables pane here. So a lot of really interesting things to hear. We hope we will be able to share some kind of mocks and wireframes on Discord soon for people to take a look at it. So here's an example of the actual tooltip. You can hover and actually see the content for this key, which is
Nice.
quite neat. And also introducing the previews
Yeah,
for
the
all the channels as part of it, which is also really nice.
cool,
Uh,
cool.
Yeah, so this is one kind of work in progress we are having. The other one interesting. Let's bother Nicola a bit more.
I'm not sure what you're writing. I can't see it in the current font.
Oh, really? Zoom in a bit
Yeah.
about localization. We'll cheer him up a bit. He's working hard and he's uh, glad to hear that. Awesome. Uh, Stay tuned for more awesome updates.
By the way, if any of you would like to peer pressure Nikolai to join maybe the next office hours, make sure to be vocal about it. So he would know that that everyone is really want to. You could ask him the more product design approaches and questions that a bit more probably in depth, and maybe he could even share with you his way of thinking and the way that he approaches those things. Yeah, so I believe that it could be really interesting.
Awesome. All right, cool. So, next things on the pipeline. So we have David, which done some really cool stuff. In the last cycle, it's on a bit of exploration. Is actually using React components inside email content, which is to actually reuse something like MGML or React email kind of flow. So basically, providing you the ability to let me share something here. Explore components. So for example, in this example, it's React email, but it's not only kind of tightly coupled to React email, is actually the ability to use React and React components inside email content, which we tried different approaches of how we can actually, you know, compile those on the backend. And we still haven't decided when we will start kind of actively working on this, but this is a really interesting approach, kind of helping people with easily manage, content,
Yeah,
basically. Uh,
over email. Yeah.
yeah. So this is another one interesting thing we've been discussing. What else? Um, Yeah, we do a lot of background work around performance optimization, and there is a lot of efforts going into this as well. We are considering replacing some of our Redis queues to something a bit more stable and a bit more high throughput enabled. This is also a bit early on. Currently, we don't have yet. We are exploring a few different options. Also, obviously, how to deal with somebody that doesn't need something like, a heavier messaging queuing system. So you can still use Redis, for simpler workloads, but actually integrating with something like Pulsar, or a bit more robust messaging platform to actually manage the queues we have today. Um, and
Uh,
yeah, I think that's mainly. So I see Ronnie saw the Finnish flag and the multi-language notification template. Check that.
So, meanwhile, I do want to make sure and just to introduce the fact that this year we, of course, going to again participate over the Hacktoberfest. We're going to prepare issues for all-time contributors, for first-time contributors, and just kind of make sure that we are part of this open source celebration. And if you would like to help us out, we will be more than glad to do so. It could be even by just mentioning us in some README file that is featuring different open source projects that will be participating in the Oktoberfest event. Of course, we have Hack Squad. It's going to be the third year, right?
Yeah, it is.
Nice. Yeah. So Hack
Week,
Squad.
right? Like time flies. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's really crazy. So third year of Hack Squad. Again, it's a parallel event to Hacktoberfest, but I find it even cooler and even more engaging because you're not just participating by yourself, but you are actually participating and doing it in a team. So I know that Nevo David from Novo, from our core team, is really putting a lot of effort in preparations. Of course, it's going to be in collaborations with other open source projects. So stay tuned. Most of those events and most of those activities and celebrations are going to be announced, and we will brief about it over our Discord server as well as our Twitter page. So just make sure that you at least once a day, once in every few days, coming to check up on what's new and what's happening with our community and the things that we are working on. Because it's going to be fun. We also, of course, preparing swags. It might be okay. It's not might be. It's going to be new designs. So you could have some new and different Novu swag. So it's also cool. um, yeah. So last year we had a lot of new contributors, and let's see what's going to happen this year. It's going to be fun. All right. If anyone will have kind of last questions, few last questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Um, yeah. Meanwhile, of course, if you have other questions that you want us to go a bit more in depth, feel free to reach out even personally to Dima. But we much more appreciate the community conversations over our Discord server, so everyone could benefit and join the conversation and learn from it. But yeah, we are all open and just in a message. In a message distance from each and every one of you. And yeah, so we're going to wrap this up. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for dedicated some time from your day. We really appreciate that. And we'll see you in the next event. Maybe the name is going to change, but it's just it's just a rumor. So yeah, have fun and have a good day. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Dima, for a really in-depth and thorough
Yes.
explanation.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.